Put you on here right now. Well, my next guest wrote a story earlier this month that got a lot of people buzzing and buzzing and buzzing about. His name is Jim Johnson. He is an editor of SouthernPigskin.com, and all he did was rank the top 50 players in the Southern Conference, which is quite the story, but because it really gets a lot of people talking, and it's great publicity for a league that needs it in more ways than one. Not just because, we're desperate for publicity. No, they need coverage like this. Also because, hey, FCS, traditionally the Southern Conference, although it has fallen a little bit, it's still pretty decent football. And you could possibly get some pros out of the Southern Conference. Anyway, Jim Johnson joins me. First, tell me a little bit, SouthernPigskin.com, your website. We're talking off the air. You cover not only the Southern Conference, but certainly the SEC, the ACC, country music. Tell us a little bit about your website here.
Sure, yeah. We at SouthernPigskin.com cover SEC, ACC, Sun Belt, and Southern Conference football. So, you mentioned some of the days of yesteryear when the Southern Conference was one of the dominant conferences in all of the FCS, and we've been able to follow App State, Georgia Southern, two of the historical powers from the Southern Conference. So we've been able to continue to cover them through their transition from the FCS to the FBS, joining the ranks of the Sun Belt Conference. But yeah, we just have a passion for covering Southern college football because, as anyone knows, it's a little bit different down here. I mean, we love our football, and everybody loves football. I'm sure everybody loves football in California, and Wyoming, and Washington, and up in New York City, but they don't love it like we do. So we have a passion for Southern college football, and we wanted to just cover everybody down here and cover it in a way that is both analytical and from a standpoint of objectivity, but to do that through the lens of that passion that we all share.
I will debate you on the objectivity then, because having lived in Pittsburgh, I will tell you that I think that is a far better football town than the Tri-Cities are. I will tell you that.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, maybe so.
Anyway, and all this, and so you can say what you will and all that, but yes, and in fact, the team here went out of business for 12 years, okay, so I kind of know where I speak with that, but the team is back now, and I tell you what, I do like your ranking here. Tyree Robinson, defensive back, ETSU. Tell me something here. I mean, I've been touting the virtues of Robinson. I was the guy who could spell his name right, and I know that when he had a bit of an altercation with Randy Sanders in last year's Southern Conference, the spring practices, I stood up for Robinson that nobody else really did around here, so I loved seeing that he was number one in your ranking. Why is Tyree Robinson the best player in the Southern Conference?
Sure, and you mentioned the altercation, and I don't feel that when I'm doing the ranking, and it's my job to litigate anything beyond purely what they do on the football field.
Sure.
Anyone who has a problem with that is fine. I get it, but to me, in a vacuum, if you were doing the way that I kind of approach the rankings, the way I would explain it is a Madden rating, right? When you look on the EA Sports Madden NFL games, or back when they had NCAA football, if you could sort everyone by their overall, you have the 99s and the 98s, et cetera, on down the line. That's sort of the way I view the ranking. And if we're talking about Tyree Robinson, I think you're talking about one of those 99, 98 caliber type players relative to the strength of the league. I just think he is an all-around, do-it-all defensive back that really didn't have any weaknesses, right? That's the one thing that stands out to me is while he has elite athletic traits and can do some things to a degree that other players can't, it's the lack of any discernible weakness in his game that I think separates him from the pack.
Well, Robinson won the game against the Citadel last year with 2 interceptions. ETSU won that game by a single score, and the interceptions were both clutch. He was the difference in that game, and so without that victory, ETSU doesn't make the playoffs last year, and of course came on as a starter halfway through his freshman season and such. Tyree Robinson also, I'd like to say, we mentioned the slapping incident with Randy Sanders, where during a drill, Robinson intercepted a Hail Mary pass and ran it out, and Sanders didn't like that, and I don't know, something or other occurred, and the next thing we know, Sanders is slapping him while wearing the helmet and such. I did want to say this. I was the one reporter who actually sought out Robinson's side, and I knew ETSU wasn't going to let me talk to Robinson, but I went out and sought out his high school coach, who then immediately started vouching for his character. And when everybody else on social media was just, ripping Robinson over things that they knew nothing about, I take a lot of pride here, Jim Johnson, in saying, no, I sought out and to find out as best I could what the player was all about, and what I kept getting was, this is a player of good character and such. Let me go talk a little bit about this. One of the surprising things, I'm hearing that Nick Tiano might be, if he has a big year for Chattanooga this year, somebody that could, say, be drafted into the NFL. You have him as the 29th best player in the Southern Conference and rank him as a quarterback behind Tyree Adams. Why?
Yeah, I think that if you wanted to talk about someone's NFL projection, that's fine, but I do think that there is a vast difference in what constitutes a good college football player in the immediacy and what could potentially constitute a good NFL player sometime down the road. I think you're talking about a little bit varied skill sets, especially in the modern day of college football, where there's such a wide disparity from one offensive scheme to the next that you don't have to be a traditional quarterback in the most, I guess, old school sense of the word to be an elite college quarterback. I think Adams, being a dual threat and being a little bit more of a playmaker than Tiano, I think, and not only that, but based on what he's done, right? If you look at the numbers, if you look at the tape and see where Adams has had success and how much success he's had relative to Tiano, I don't really think it's all that close. Now, granted, I don't know that is that applicable to their NFL status, but we are ranking them purely as college football players. And so when you look back at Adams, who's been one of the most productive all-purpose or dual-threat quarterbacks, not just in the Southern Conference, but in the entire country for really 2 years now, I don't know that there's that much of a debate for him versus Tiano, but I do understand why someone would favor Tiano over Adams as it relates to translating to the National Football League.
Well, you got Adams number 3 now. Because of Adams, I picked Western Carolina to finish 5th, middle of the road. They were 3-8 last year. Would have finished 4-7. Had a kicker against ETSU, been able to make a 28-yard chip shot. Remember that. But okay, 3-8, 4-7. Really, what's the difference, right? In all this. How far do you think Adams can take the Catamounts this year? Do you think, are they a contender for, say, a 6-5 record or even more?
Yeah, I think they should probably be right around there. And I was, for one, surprised by how low they ended up a season ago. I anticipated them to, if not contend for the league, at least be amongst that second tier. And for whatever reason, they just weren't. And it really wasn't good enough, I don't think, based on the talent that they had. And they still have some weapons back on offense. I think Owen Pasinke, he's in the ranking. He is my number 1 tight end.
Yes.
Southern Conference. He's someone that I think could, with a big season, if him and Adams are on the same page, could contend for All-American type honors. So, yeah, there's some weapons, but based on what I saw last year, it can't be a one-man team, right? Tyree Adams is not going to carry them. He's not worth 5 or 6 wins on his own. So I think I'm with you, probably middle of the pack. 500 is in the cards. I think there is a chance to get there, but after last season, I'm hesitant to say they can do much more than that.
We're talking to Jim Johnson. He's an editor at Southern Pigskin, and he's also the producer of 3 and Out and host of Explosive Recruiting on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. But one of the ranking he had, Adrian Hope of Furman. Now, depending on, I've seen both stats, so I don't know exactly which one to go, but I've seen him being credited for 14 and 15 sacks, okay, depending on who's doing the stat keeping. Now, you've got him ranked number 5 in terms of players in the Southern Conference, but 3rd overall in terms of a defender. And it says a lot of Tyree Robinson, who you ranked number 1, the junior defensive back, but also Nasir Player, who's talking to the media today at SoCon Media Days, defensive lineman for ETSU. You've got both Player and Robinson ranked ahead of Hope, despite the fact that Hope was, Reggie White and Lawrence Taylor and all those guys rolled up into one when it came to Michael Strahan when it came to sacks. Tell us, why would you have Player and Robinson ahead of such a dominant pass rusher like Hope?
Yeah, well, I think it goes a little bit more than the numbers. I don't think that fully encapsulates both Robinson and Player's total impact on a game, right? Because while the numbers tell a story, they don't always paint the entire picture. And so when you look at ETSU's defense a season ago, it really was a comprehensive unit that was good at pretty much every level of the defense, from the defensive line to the linebacking core to the secondary. And so while individually, because it was such a talented group, no one player perhaps had the raw production that Adrian Hope has, arguably as individual players, they are more impactful in a vacuum, for example, than Hope is himself. Now, I'm a big fan of Hope's freshman last year. I think he is going to be poised to take a big leap right from that freshman to that sophomore year, another year in college, another year in a collegiate weight system. But for my money, because of how good that defense was as a unit, I don't think that we fully appreciate, just looking at statistics, how good Player and Robinson respectively were.
I get that, and that's one of the reasons why when I was doing my media poll, and I used your rankings, and I said, let's see here, as part of my guide, Jim Johnson, they, by the way, have not, this is Media Day Southern Conference, they have not yet released the predicted order of finish just yet, but you had Robinson number 1, Player number 4, ahead of Hope. And yeah, I do know pure pass rushers sometimes don't grade out in the rankings like some other players do. I can remember when Kevin Green used to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He would be among the leaders in sacks, if not, I guess, the leader outright. But everybody used to say, well, yeah, but Greg Lloyd's a more complete linebacker. This is one set of his game, and I sense that that's what you're seeing with Adrian Hope. But nevertheless, you got, of the top 6 players in the SoCon, 3 of them are Buccaneers. Robinson, Player, and running back Quay Holmes, who you rank as number 6. So I will ask you, I know that nobody knows who the quarterback is, although I guess maybe, Weldon would be, transferring from Miami, the idea of the front runner. But would ETSU be your pick then to win the Southern Conference, since you think they're top-heavy in talent?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting situation, right, picking between them and Wofford. I don't really see anyone else competing, not on the level that ETSU and Wofford are. And with Wofford, it's an interesting case because they have a lot of players that were in the ranking. I think they led the ranking with the most players, I want to say off the top of my head. With ETSU, obviously a close second, like neck and neck. But yes, ETSU has the top-end talent. Wofford perhaps has a little bit more depth. Now, one thing that could be misleading is Wofford is very offensive line heavy. They lose some guys on defense, specifically Michael Horton. Or no, Michael Horton is back. They lose Davis, I believe. The all-conference, they're really all-American type talent. But with Wofford's offensive line going back, I know they lose a bunch in some running backs, skill talent or skill players, but their offensive line is going to be awesome. They're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to move the ball efficiently on offense. I have some questions defensively. And with ETSU, it's, I don't want to say a studs and duds thing. I think there's real bona fide superstar talent and then some more unproven guys coming up behind some of their departures. So neck and neck, my gut reaction right now would probably be to say Wofford, because ultimately I do think that this is a game still won in the trenches. You can spread the ball out all you want. And some teams want to do that. Some teams like Wofford are going to line up and hit you in the mouth. But ultimately, no matter what kind of offense you're going to run, this is a game that's won at the line of scrimmage. And until I see evidence otherwise, I think Wofford's offensive line talent, where they go 5 deep of all conference caliber players, one guy who might be the best player or might have the best NFL prospects in the entire league is Justice Basinger.
Yes.
For that reason, I'm going to go with Wofford, a slight edge over ETSU, but they should both be playoff teams clearly.
Well, Jim Johnson, then great minds think alike. But what is it about Basinger that makes him such a great guard? Look, the Wofford product, I mean, you hear linemen, and it basically gets to be reputation, because there aren't stats here. I can try to argue, well, maybe Helms is not that good. His yards per carry average, there are better backs than that in the Southern Conference. And you say, well, look at the amount of times he carried the ball or something like that. So there's two sides of it. It's more difficult with linemen. Certainly a guard. Why is Basinger being talked about by some as the best player in the Southern Conference and a possible NFL draft choice? What makes him such a dominant guard?
Sure, and I would absolutely hear an argument if you wanted to say Basinger over Robinson. That's probably the only one. That's kind of what I was deciding between
Mm-hmm.
1 and 2. I think you could flip on them either way. You know, if I woke up tomorrow, I could, go back and change it or whatever in my head because they're just so close. But I think Basinger, obviously, because he does project as an NFL offensive lineman as well, obviously he meets those size, speed, athletic traits, thresholds, the minimum thresholds that you have to be able to compete with professional football players. But beyond that, I think it's also a mindset thing. You hear cliches talked all the time when you're discussing offensive linemen. Oh, he's a mauler. Oh, he's a road grader. Oh, that's just a mean guy. He doesn't like anybody. He can play in a telephone booth. And all that's fine and good. Some of that is actually true sometimes. They're cliches for a reason. And all of those that I just mentioned fit Justice Basinger. I think he could use some work in pass pro. Now, granted, for the purposes of Wofford, as he, as it pertains to his success as a college player, that doesn't need, a ton of work. They're not going to throw the ball a lot anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I don't know that he is an elite athlete for the position, but he just works really hard. He gets after on every play, and running the ball specifically as it pertains to their offense, he gets to the second level and does a really good job of finding extra work. And other than that, he is just a mean guy. He looks to maul people, and I think that's one thing that I like more than anything else for an offensive guard specifically. You want those athletic traits in a tackle, somebody that's got the big body but the ballet feet. For Basinger playing in the interior of the offensive line, I just want somebody who's a bully.
I also think that what's intriguing is because Wofford is such a running team, he's a guard. So he's doing pulling. It's, as you mentioned, pass protection. Maybe there's some discussions there because Wofford, only throws the ball 1 out of every 4 plays, I think it is, or maybe even slightly less than that. And he's a guard. Guards, it's the tackle. That's their job, is the pass protection. But, Basinger, I think, is the player, and it's very intriguing because he is a guard that has so many people pick the Terriers to win the Southern Conference. We'll see what the official media release is today for their poll. Anyway, let me just ask you this here, Jim Johnson of SouthernPigskin.com. You said you picked Wofford to win it. Who would be your surprise team in the SoCon?
A surprise team to me, I think, would probably be Furman.
Okay.
We talked about Adrian Hope earlier. I think that is a team who was pretty close last
Yeah.
year, if not for a couple slip-ups here and there. They could have been mentioned alongside both ETSU and Wofford. So I don't know that I'm going out on any limbs here, shocking anybody with my Furman pick, obviously. But that is a team that was very close last year. Perhaps were better than their record, and ultimately has a lot of talent back. And not just talent, but talent at some key positions where they have some really good offensive skill players, and then a defense led by Adrian Hope that has clear playmaking. I think you would like to see them be a little more consistent on a week-to-week, on a down-to-down basis. But they have guys that are absolute game changers on that side of the ball. So I think my pick would be Furman outside of those top two.
If Juwan Bell hadn't have downed the ball at the 3, if he had called fair catch, maybe it is Furman that goes to the playoffs this past season and not ETSU. But you like Furman as a surprise team. I kind of, with the Tiano to Bryce Nunnally passing combination, I kind of think that Chattanooga is the sleeper. Who do you think is the overrated team? If you had to pick, in the Southern Conference, let me just ask that. Who are you saying that? I don't know about those guys.
Overrated. I don't know, because it seems the league does seem like fairly clear cut at the top to me, and then there's a little bit more, I guess, of a cluster in the middle. So if there was one team, I guess. VMI is going to be at the bottom. They just are. That is what it is. ETSU and Walker are going to be at the top. Furman maybe just a notch below that pair of teams. If I had to pick someone in that middle group that I think could really slip towards the bottom of the conference, it might be the Citadel. I think that they were clearly a power under the previous regime. And I like Coach Thompson coming in. I think he's a good guy. I think he did a really good job when he was in a coordinator role. But I just haven't loved what I've seen from them. I think they've pretty consistently underachieved relative to their expectations or what their expectations should be. And while they have some talent coming off, it just doesn't overwhelm you across the board. That is a team that, with their offense, they can beat anybody on any given Saturday. But if they get down, they're in trouble. I like the Citadel fine well enough, but if you're making me choose, I think that's a team that can finish up close to the bottom pretty darn near to VMI.
I agree with you. In fact, I think this is a year where VMI will beat the Citadel. There's my pick. I mean, I reserve the right to change it when injuries and things like that come about, but I just look at passing team versus running team. I like the team that wants 7 yards of play, not the one that wants 3 or 4. That's sort of my philosophy there. I actually do think VMI will be the most improved team in the conference. However, that probably means they're going to go from 1-10 to 3-8. They're going to go from illiteracy to C-spot run. But, you know, they do have a good passing game. And SoCon John Hooper actually thinks it's the best in all of the conference, to be even more than Chattanooga's. So there you go with that. He is Jim Johnson. He is the editor of Southern Pigskin. He also hosts Explosive Recruiting on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, and also is a producer of 3 and Out. And just go to Southern Pig. He has ranked the top 50 players in the Southern Conference, and I can tell from talking to you, you know what you speak of. And Tyree Robinson, yes. And Tyree Robinson was number 1. So there you go. All those guys that criticized him after last year's spring practice, they didn't know. All right, Johnson does. So do I. Tri-City Sports Now, coming back after this from Asian House. Well, that